But, well, thanks everybody for joining us for our 5th and final webinar in our INCLUDES Network Improvement Community set of webinars and INCLUDES Center work. This is the, like I said, the 5th in our series of webinars, starting with information going back to introducing networked improvement communities, refining high leverage problems, engaging in and using data to drive improvement, designing formative evaluation for complex systems, and then today's topic, where we're joined by Jeremy Roschelle of SRI and Chris Thorne from Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. We'll be talking about the topic of communicating effectively within a network. This sets us up for a face-to-face meeting that we'll be having here in Menlo Park, March 14th and 15th, and we look forward to those who got their applications in, and those notifications should be going out soon. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeremy, who will get us started talking about the ways in which he has thought about and engaged in different strategies around communicating with different levels and different circles of influence related to his project work. And so with that, I will turn it over to Jeremy, who will share his screen and lead us through his remarks, and then we will pick up Chris Thorne and end our time today with some question time.
Thanks, Andy. Pleased to be here and excited to be part of INCLUDES and sharing some thoughts on collective impact. Let me bring up my slides here. Share PowerPoint. And here we go. Andy, can you just confirm that's showing?
Yep, can see it clearly.
Thanks. And there we go. Okay, a few words about me. I was an undergrad in computer science and then got a PhD in the learning sciences. And my own research has tended to focus most strongly on technology for learning mathematics and research around that. And I'll be talking about communication today based on 3 types of experiences that are relevant. One is I direct the Center for Technology and Learning at SRI. It's a large, complex research center with about 90 staff, 40 to 50 projects going on per year. And so, there's a lot of communication to keep that group running coherently and effectively. Secondly, I've led several large studies, which are impact studies, and they aren't collective impact, but I think there's a lot in common between studies looking at impact. For example, the SimCalc study was in the state of Texas, and it was happening all over the state, and it was trying to improve mathematics instruction, as all these studies were. And so it is, in fact, running these studies does involve organizing a large group of people to try to make an improvement together. The Assistance Project I'll talk about in some more depth. It was in the state of Maine and was statewide, well, it was spread out throughout the state. Reasoning Mind is in West Virginia. And so in all these cases, we've been working with approximately 100 teachers per project trying to make a change. And finally, I'll be talking about the cyber learning community, which I run. It's a support center called Circle that serves all the NSF projects that work together on the theme of improving learning with emerging technologies. And so that has been a heavy communication role and presence. So that's basically where I'll be talking from. As an organizer for my remarks, I want to think about communication as having 3 levels to it that have to work together. There's the inner circle of communication, a circle of engagement, and a circle of influence. The inner circle, to do this improvement work, you're always working with a core team, and you're working with that team over a long time on really complex problems. And so part of the communication challenge is how do you work effectively with that team? Then there's the circle of engagement, which is thinking about the participants in the work of making improvements, and how do you engage them through communication. And then in every project where you're trying to make an impact, you are also trying to influence a much larger audience, which are stakeholders at NSF, at other states, other institutions who want to learn from your lessons. And so I want to think through with you today in my remarks these 3 layers. With regard to the inner circle, I'll be talking about communication for the relationships that sustain the intensity of teamwork that's required in these projects. For the engagement circle, I'll be talking about the idea that it's an ongoing campaign to keep everyone highly engaged in the work, and that campaign never ends. And influence, I'll be talking about the concept of communication is really how do we get to stories that can travel and inspire and activate others. So let's talk about the first one, work for the core. Any improvement project, collective impact project is going to need a really fairly large and really tightly in touch team at its core that is really driving the effort. And that team is going to work together for a long time. They're going to need to be highly committed. Their diversity is going to be a strength for the effort. And they're going to be making a lot of decisions in the field that can't be mandated centrally. And so they're also going to be involved, your core team, in building relationships and doing tasks with the participants. And there's going to be a lot of interpretation. They're going to be engaged about what to do in the moment. So how do you build a team that can really pull that off over the long run? And so I want to think with you for a second about the communication aspect of building that team. And so here's 3 lessons that I draw upon from the many projects I shared with you that I've done in this area. The first thing is that every meeting, every opportunity to communicate has the potential to be about relationships or to be about getting a task done. Are we coming to know each other better? And to what degree are we getting something done? And it's been my experience that no matter what people think, the first year is mostly about building strong relationships. It's about really building that trust among the people on the team so they can do this work together and trust that they will be supported and that their ideas count and their ideas matter. And so of course you're doing tasks in the first year, but I wouldn't underestimate the degree to which it's all about relationships in the first year. An aspect of that I see is the best projects get done when you align the goals of the project, largely what you propose to NSF in the case of an Includes project, with the personal goals of each person. And that involves coming to know what those people truly care about and what difference they want to make in the world and what their perspective is. And I've found the best research happens when you find a way to honor the project as an opportunity for growth for each of those people and an opportunity for them to make a difference. And finding the meeting ground between what people want to do as individuals and what the project is trying to accomplish as a whole is just really key to sustaining that teamwork over the long run and making people feel super activated and engaged, which is what you really need, because they're going to have to be really committed and passionate about what they're doing. And then the final concept I want to share with you about relationships for the teamwork is something that I found to be a cornerstone of success across projects here, which is the idea of multivocal rigor. These kind of collective impact projects are rarely authoritative, top-down driven projects. They really their strength comes from collective commitment to making things better. And of course, that has to be coherent. It can't work if everyone's trying to make things better in their own way that has nothing to do with the others. So that's where the idea of rigor comes in. I also think of famous partnerships in the history of science or in the arts, Lennon and McCartney, Crick and Watson, Kahneman and Tversky, that a strength in a rigorous project really can come from having multiple voices, which are quite different, coming at it from a different angle. And so I think a lot about how do we really engage that voice of improvement in each member of our core team, so they're not sitting there thinking about how to take orders, but they're thinking about the voice of improvement within them and how to align that with everyone else on the team so we're all pulling in the same direction. So that's my first set of thoughts on the inner circle, the core team. And now let's move on to the campaign for engagement. This is with all your participants in the improvement work. We're going to be at all the sites that are trying to improve what's going on at their site. And so I found in these large multi-year projects, that getting people engaged is not a one-time shot. There's not a phase where you get them engaged and then you have them engaged and then you're done and they're engaged for the rest of the thing. It's an ongoing effort, and there's always threats to disengagement. And to keep that engagement going requires not just making an initial plan and sticking to it, but a lot of creative adaptation as you go to figure out how to keep the maximal engagement of people. And so I'm going to look at that across recruitment, implementation, and sustainability briefly, sort of phases in the life of a project. So in terms of recruitment, a collective impact effort is always seeking to get more people involved and to minimize how many people you're losing. And to do that, a really key thing is you'll start out with a message for what you think your project is about, but really shaping that so it's really important to the participants. And also, they're going to have concerns with what you're trying to do, making sure you understand those and address them systematically. So let me give an example of that. One of my large collective, not collective impact, but it was an efficacy study, was with a tool called Assessments. And initially in the proposal, we described that as an intelligent tutoring system that would help math teachers. Now, if you think about it from the recruitment perspective, math teachers aren't that interested in an intelligent tutoring system. They're a little bit interested, but not a high drive. We ended up reframing the study considerably to be about online homework and about the system as a tool that supports students and supports teachers in making homework more effective. Now, it turns out homework is something that everyone's required to do, but no one feels particularly good about. And so the reframing about homework really fit a need that teachers had and made it much, much easier to recruit and sustain their participation. A side note that I have in parentheses about that is when you're thinking about how to recruit people, you can think of what you're trying to do either as a vitamin, that it's something you take that makes things better, or it's a painkiller, that something is painful in everyone's environment and you're the aspirin that makes that pain less. And the painkillers draw people and sustain people much more powerfully in my experience. So saying online homework is homework is something that no one likes and there's a lot of pain around. We can make homework easier and faster and cheaper, more efficient, is a much more powerful message than saying, hey, we're going to raise test scores. People want the pain to go away. So implementation, you're always constantly, I'll try to go through the second ones a little more quickly. We're trying to make it easy for the participants to do something good and make it easier for everyone to do good. And so an example from Assessments on this is for them to do online homework, they have to put the homework in. And we tried to get as much of that in for them as possible so that it would be easy to use the system, so there wouldn't be a data entry burden. But then we also came up with a metric, and we came up with a very simple metric, which is, are they opening the online reports that Assessment produces? And we used that metric as implementation was occurring to figure out which teachers were using Assessments and which weren't using them, and then to address additional support to those who weren't using it. So we tried to make it easy for everyone to do it, but then when they weren't, we had adaptive responses to figure out what was going wrong. And that continues with sustainability. Don't wait to start on a sustainability plan. Sustainability is about lowering the threshold to getting in and reducing barriers. Start on that right away. And my final slide is to talk about the outermost circle, which is people that you're trying to influence. And so, of course, there's the usual parts of dissemination, writing papers, making presentations. But as I've done many of these projects, and Circle is a good example here, I've really come to realize that it's not the stories that we tell that carry the day in terms of the influence of the project. It's often the stories that our participants are able to tell to other participants. And so how do you make it such that you get participants activated to tell stories to future participants and to be part of recruiting people? And so I have 4 I's in here that I think are part of framing that communication, which is, first of all, it's about identity. Who are we as an improvement initiative, and building that identity of who we are and making it a broad umbrella identity that all the participants feel it's part of their identity. Secondly, what problem are we trying to solve, and framing that problem in a way that is appealing to everyone. It's a shared problem. What's our innovation? What do we have that's special? What's unique about this? What's exciting about it? And finally, what's the evidence? What's our story about impact? And so my sense of the communications of impact and advocacy that really influence are when you get people who are affiliated with your project among the stakeholders, who feel a strong identity, can articulate the problem that they're solving in a way that draws others in, can explain the innovation and the impact. And so I'll close my remarks there and turn it over to Chris. Now I'll stop sharing.
All right.
So Chris, while you're getting set up, I want to remind folks who have joined us later on that we're hearing from Jeremy first, then Chris, and then we will have some time for questions. And while you're on, to please mute your lines, and then when we have the question and answer time begin, we will unmute, and then please feel free to use the chat at any point. I'll be monitoring that to answer your questions as we're moving forward and can pass those along to our speakers. So with that, I will pass it over to world traveler Chris Thorne.
Yeah, that's right. All right, is that showing up?
We're seeing the dual screens right now, Chris.
What are we seeing?
Seeing two. We're seeing both the main as well as potentially the notes.
Is that right? How interesting. Well, that's exciting. Yeah, I love these things. I don't want presentation mode. Well, fine. Now do we just see one?
We see your PowerPoint slide, not in presentation mode. Oh, there we go. That looks great, Chris.
Yeah, no, the setup is too crazy. All right, so thank you. I'm going to actually take a deep dive into a particular community to talk about some issues as a network community becomes mature. So I'll be diving into the Carnegie Net Pathways network community. And so there's me doing my very favorite thing, which is sitting at the helm of a narrowboat in the UK on the old industrial canal. But my background is in sociology and technology. So I've been fascinated since as long as I can remember about how do we support collaboration between unlikely partners. And as a result, wandered through most of the social sciences as I tried to figure out what each of econ, security studies, political science, and sociology could tell me about that problem. So I've been at the foundation here, working on network improvement community and improvement science work for 4.5 years. Before that, I spent nearly 20 years at the Wisconsin Center for Education Research, where I led the technical services group, sort of an applied technology group. And a lot of my work was about implementing and supporting collaborative knowledge management systems for large-scale research and research projects in the education space, sort of all over the board, analytics, math science projects, language acquisition. So it was really an applied social science problem space for me, and this is what I continue to do here. So you talked about this stuff, I think, in the earlier sessions about what a NIC is. And in particular, the Carnegie Net Pathways was founded to tackle a particular problem. So it was not a pre-existing set of social organization. It was formed to work on a specific aim, and that is the problem of the majority of students arriving at community colleges being unprepared to engage in the mathematics of college, actually being unprepared to actually engage in the mathematics of secondary education. So needing substantial remediation. So 60–70% arrive needing remediation. 80% of those students actually never get out of developmental mathematics, which means about 500,000 students every year have to give up their dreams of college and career because of their inability to complete college-level mathematics. So it was identified as one of the biggest problems by a group of practitioners and researchers back in 2008, 2009, when the foundation was basically putting together its ideas around network communities. And then this group was founded. Back then, our initial aim was to double. The original aim was to double the success rate for students placed in developmental mathematics. And then we found out that the one-year success rate was 5%, and that didn't seem very ambitious. So that got shifted to an order of magnitude to move success rates from 5% to 50% in a single year. And so that was identified as a worthy goal. And so again, if you've done some work here on network improvement communities already or other collective action frameworks, the right hand of this screen then represents our practical theory about how that happens. It also, from a communications point of view, organizes the work. So each one of these ideas and institutional structures need to change how leadership approaches providing support for new ways of organizing math instruction. Also then has implications for the work and the communication structures. This means we're going to work with leaders. It means we're going to work at the time scale of leaders, which is annual planning, quarterly reviews, as opposed to at the bottom, we talk about advancing quality teaching. That's our area for supporting professional learning. That could be a daily or a weekly activity that supports faculty all through the adoption curve and into their first year of teaching and beyond. And so the communication technologies, the pace, support those things. And so people find this is both a practical theory, but it's also how the work is organized and how many of the supporting communication structures are organized. The productive persistence one, I'm going to just dive into there to give an example as well. That's the social and emotional supports for students, mindset, belonging, strategies. But likewise, it actually has its own organizing practical theory around the different elements of social and emotional support. And likewise, the work is located under these, and the communication structure around teams testing new ideas is then also located underneath this practical theory about how to move the needle on improving student self-efficacy or whatever. It also requires the supporting structure. So, and then there's a lot of other social systems and a lot of work that wraps around both the doing of the math pathways, but in the larger scale work about preparing institutional readiness and support. So there's an onboarding curve that has its own support structures, that has its own sort of methods of participation and a common data infrastructure. So this is sort of just a top-down systems view. But going into this work, we do have a set of principles around collective action, and we've actually tested these not only in our own space, but working with other groups that engage in collective action work. So working with the Strive Network, or I've spent a fair amount of time working with the Billions Institute and the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, their Breakthrough Series, about how to scale ideas that work. So that we do believe that face-to-face is absolutely critical. So you'll see face-to-face. That clear participation structures, we have a lot of different roles represented in our network. in that the communication structures and technologies have to respect that. The temporal resolution of the work is quite different. We're supporting students in real time with help desk and other things, but there's heavy work to be done by administrators, but in a much less frequent fashion that has to be done at the right times of the year. We have a lot of content as well, so that there are the technologies we use have to match the payload. So if we have to send attachments, if we have to work with shared documents, we have to be able to support that. And we're also working at very large scale, so that with the notion of actually going to greater scale. So what I might do for a smaller research project with a limited set of funded participants is quite different than what I've got to design for. We've got the challenge of designing for actually being successful. You know, this would work for 20 colleges, but I might have 200. So I've got to think about designing for scale. And I've got people who want to participate what might be seen as irrationally. So I've got people that actually, in a large community, I'm going to have people that are going to, for intrinsic reasons, want to dig in and do more, and I need to be able to provide support, deliver support structures for them. And finally, is that this is a very complicated structure. A mature network improvement community has lots of moving parts, but also sort of as a principle, I need to make sure that people don't have to know my org chart to get the help they need wherever they happen to live in the community. Some of you are probably familiar with this as well, but what I'm talking about is I've got a lot of groupware. If I sort of reveal my age, I've got a groupware problem, and I generally have these up in my office at all times. This is Jonathan Gruden's work back from 1994 in the communications of the ACM, is that every time I think about supporting this work is the biggest one is the first one, is that the work that I don't want the people providing me with data or working in the system to feel that I'm deriving more benefit than they are from their work. And so if you haven't read the piece and you're trying to support large-scale development work, this is one of my absolute favorite articles, and it informs what we do. So in terms of participation structures, we've actually got we do a national forum that's about bringing innovations in from the field. So we do an important face-to-face event where we do analytics work. Colleagues from SRI routinely join us for that. But improvements from testing, new faculty training. We do a Winter Institute, a winter face-to-face meeting for colleges considering joining, where we can put them together with administrators, instructors, advisors, to get a better understanding of what it means to join a community in terms of the impact on these different roles. We're actually now testing our ability to support that work in regional areas as well. So these structures have worked well for us. We're working with State University of New York to field and test a series of similar events that would be SUNY-wide in New York, and we're in the second year of testing there to see if we can support more people through a distributed face-to-face infrastructure. We have a lot of regional training events as well, where there's a high density of colleges, and there's a history of collective action that can we provide high quality, the sort of support structures, the templates for an event, the registration systems, can we provide an infrastructure that helps people replicate successful events without us being there running the event. And then we have typical annual presentations that people do in their disciplinary topical conferences and a steering committee meeting. But we do a whole series of synchronous events that are designed to be at the temporal resolution of the work around different roles. So we do quarterly webinars with a governing group of national faculty, with a funders collaborative. So we bring funders in under the hood to provide advice and to actively provide advice and support that we need a participation structure for them, likewise for administrators and for local faculty who help facilitate the work on the ground. But likewise, as you can see, we do other communication strategies around monthly calls with content development teams for the two curricula, weekly hangouts or calls around instructional support, and a large range of asynchronous. So threaded discussions, probably one of the most valued things that the faculty find is simply having a place to talk about getting better at teaching. They don't have it where they work, and providing a threaded discussion where they can talk about their practice has been incredibly enabling for them. We also have pretty dense connections in real time. Our near real time is synchronous, so we use Slack for all of the internal teams, both located here at the Foundation and across the country, to keep the teams, communication with the teams working. We use Salesforce for communication. We have a number of faculty and administrators who provide part of the leadership and part of the actual day-to-day, do some of the day-to-day work of the network, and we need to have a rich relationship management solution because they're charged in being relationship managers, just as we who are full-time on the project. We do a lot of professional learning that used as embedded video with embedded assessments, so that Edpuzzle is a large part of our professional learning environment. We're actually just in this last 2 years started also using where we drop ship video collection tool, Swivel, that allows faculty to collect video to support lesson study that is a part of our professional learning environment. The other big thing is that we do a lot of content development. We're working to develop the curriculum collaboratively across the whole network, and so that we use Google Drive and Google Docs for content development across a wide range of artifacts, everything you need to support ongoing development of several different curricula, the professional learning, all the materials for professional learning support, for adoption, all work are supported by a Google domain. We have a professional service desk that's available, not quite 24/7, but many hours a day because we're in 4 time zones, and students and faculty expect timely support. And because we aren't a single college, we actually have to provide some of the student information system and human resource system supports for knowing who our students are, what they are doing over time in our courses, likewise our faculty, what they're doing over time. And so there's a notification function, reporting, surveying functions built into our analogs for these student systems and human resource systems as, again, supporting the automated communication that are required to maintain a large and complex instructional intervention. So that's a lot. I don't know if I should go into these 2 scenarios, but that I could, if there's interest, actually provide examples around how these things come together in these 2 different scenarios about preparing, how we work to prepare teachers, new teachers, or how we maintain the curriculum. But that maybe was too much already.
Well, Chris, I think we'll take advantage of the break to see if there are any questions for folks who have dialed in with us. The way we've worked in the past, as a reminder, is to use the chat function in the WebEx, which is located in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. So please feel free to unmute and raise your question directly to Chris or Jeremy at this point. And we'll pause for a quick second while we wait for anyone to enter in a chat. But Chris, maybe this will be a useful question to set us up for whether or not to dive into one of these scenarios. But thinking about the ways in which sort of knowledge management plays in this as well. So how does the communication process facilitate, impede, or somewhere in the middle, the ways in which you all within a NIC environment can learn from the different tests that are occurring related to those practical theories that you showed us at the outset, so around productive persistence and so forth. So how do you collect what's happening on the front lines and then make sure others within the network are hearing about what might be happening in one or two community colleges throughout the entire NIC as you try and spread good ideas that are developing evidence over time?
Yeah, I could do a concrete example there. So we have a whole series of interventions for social and emotional supports that are built into the curriculum already, and so but that we're constantly developing new ones also to address issues where maybe some subgroup isn't showing the same level of engagement or we're not seeing the same improvement in, say, mindset or belonging in some subgroups. So we actually have teams of faculty that are with an improvement coach working to test new ideas. So we have routines for every week calls with a group of faculty who actually coordinate other faculty at their site. So there's teams of faculty who are testing new interventions. A recent one is what we call a noticing routine, where when a student is missing, another student in their work group, in their small group, will simply notice through an email or a text saying, hey, we missed you, we hope to see you next time, here's what we missed. And so the faculty teams report data on, so that in particular is intended to improve class-by-class attendance rates. So all courses then roll up per report to their attendance rate period by period. And on that team, I think it's an every other week call actually, is the improvement coach actually reviews the results of the testing to see whether or not we're having an impact. That's actually collected in a Google Drive folder that everybody has access to. The improvement coach puts it all into a run chart so we can actually see whether or not we're having the intended impact. Successful tests are then aggregated and go out in part of a monthly newsletter to all faculty so that we see that there's an evidence base. The coach then discusses how good the evidence is, whether or not we should do another round of testing. In that case, this one is just past where we've tested it in over 25 classrooms. The most recent newsletter actually announced that we're ready to, this now has enough of an evidence base that this is going to be rolled into the curriculum, into the core curriculum for the next year. So that, yeah, there's phone and Google Hangout support for the actual work, and then there's regular communication structures that are part of an explicit role of improvement coach that then go out through their regular newsletters. So, and then of course that's all discoverable both on the website and stored in the Google Drive that's available for full text search as well.
Jeremy, I'm curious about if you are thinking about the different levels of influence in relation to how communication moves from the inner to the outer. Are there particular roles or team members that you have in place either in your work with the Circle Center or across the different evaluation projects, Jeremy, that have a similar function as what Chris was raising in terms of an improvement coach and then a series of routines that support this collection, analysis, and sharing of what is learned from those who are participating to varying degrees from the inner to the engagement to the influence circle?
Yeah, absolutely. you know, in all the efficacy trials, part of the definition of efficacy is you're testing something that is working as intended, and so you're allowed to coach people to bring it up to the working as intended level. And so in each of the projects, there'll be a team of 2 to 3 people who are intimately, in the cases of those projects, they're working with teachers who are at various schools throughout a state. In the case of SimCalc, we actually worked with 4 resource centers. Each would had relationships with teachers in one region of Texas. And it's a little different in each state where those people came from. And so, yeah, absolutely, it's a two-way street where we will often have check-ins, weekly or bi-weekly check-ins, where we're really hearing what's going on out there. And then we're also trying to coordinate what we're hearing from the field and what's working and sharing that across. And then we're also looking at system data where they're using a technology. The technology tells us how it's being used. And we can direct people to maybe need to check out what's going on over there because it doesn't look like it's being used right now. And so it's a very much a two-way thing. And I liked Chris's remarks a lot about pacing the work. So this figuring out what's going on often intensifies around key milestones. And you need more and faster then, and then there's periods where things are just going routinely and maybe you need a little less.
One of the themes that we've been addressing throughout the series, and it's seemingly an accidental one, but its prevalence means that it has some salience across the different issues and the topics that we've been addressing, and that's the role of evidence, like what is good enough for a particular audience. And I'm wondering, based on both of your experiences, Chris, you had mentioned the tools and routines around run charts. Those would be, in sort of Jeremy's framing, useful for those in the inner circle of the communication. Have you found difficulties, or have you found easier data products, analyses, forms of evidence that communicate to those on the inner circle, engagement circle, and influence as you're trying to gather funders, gather others who are potentially supporters of your work or new participants in a network? What is that role of evidence, and what lessons have you learned as you've thought about communicating both formative and summative findings related to what folks are doing?
Do you want to go first, Chris, or?
All right. Well, you know, first of all, there is this temporal resolution to evidence, right? You know, when I'm working at the practitioner level, practitioners have an appetite for the entire. They're working day to day in the support of the work. So, since we do spend some time training people in improvement methods, and I have the luxury of nearly everybody, everybody I'm working with in an instructional setting is either a math or statistics faculty. So presenting a run chart with a median and upper-lower bound is not a daunting task. I would worry more about that if I weren't presenting these data to quantitatively literate colleagues. But at the same time, right, those things actually don't give me a ton of traction when I think about presenting to leadership or to funders or to policymakers. It's like, okay, that's nice that you've been able to improve attendance rates in courses by 15%, but it's not the outcome I care about. And so, what I have to do for those is to link those things up to the longer range outcomes of interest, right? I've got to tie those things. Attendance makes sense, makes a difference because I'm giving greater opportunity to learn, which is going to translate into success rates, persistence, graduation, transfer. So that for many of the audience, those are great. Those are actually required by the faculty as well. But as we get up to broader and broader circles of membership out to simply appreciation of the work. I've got to translate it into the more important, longer-term social outcomes, and then use traditional forms of representation then.
Jeremy, have you found similar needs, and does this fit within the idea of kind of the ways in which you frame the vitamin versus the painkiller, the big goal versus the intermediary or process that you're trying to intervene on? So I imagine in work around assessments, for example, that a headline is we get teachers to look at reports, and that is great for those more proximal interventions and efforts that you all are doing, but I imagine different groups are more interested than in if teachers are using these reports, what does this mean for moving the needle on some of these larger, more distal assessments? So how have you navigated some of those different requirements?
Yeah, actually you led right into something I was going to say, which is, the sort of outcome measures aren't usually, there's a big separation between the implementation measures and the outcome measures. And the outcome measures are usually too late to be useful in the pace of improvement you want to make. You might have to wait till the end of the year to find that out, and that's much too late. So the key thing is we start with a logic model and working with whoever has the innovation in a particular case, like with assessments, there's a team at WPI, to trace the path from the inputs they're going to provide through to those outcomes and look for key intermediate stages that will tell us if this is proceeding according to plan. So in the case of the online homework tool, assessments, are they logging in? Are they assigning homework? Are they opening the reports? And there's a simple logic of that. If they're not doing those things, it's unlikely that the bigger outcomes are happening. In the case of a different program that's a math curriculum, we were concerned with the purpose of the math curriculum was to be adaptive and give kids who needed more challenge harder problems. And so our kids, is anybody getting to the harder problems, or are they just everyone sticking with the easy problems, turned out to be a good metric. And so we're looking for things that are really quick to measure and detect, and that can be pretty direct in what you would be able to do or say to the participant if you're not seeing what you expect. You're not opening the reports. Why? And I just also wanted to say that be clear that really one of the key communication things is that the evidence never speaks entirely for itself. So we need these people who have a lot of contact in the field to be helping us interpret what does it mean if they aren't opening the reports? What might be the reason for that? And what can we do about it? And so really putting our heads together and sharing those insights to form a coherent story about what we should do to make things better. And so, of course, you want to synchronize all that rapid change to improve implementation towards what you're learning about outcomes as you go, so that you're improving the aspects of implementation that have the biggest lever for the outcomes. But that's happening on a much more slower, that alignment's happening on a slower cycle. And then you had asked Andy also about how does that change as you go all the way to the influence side. And I think as you go to influence, it goes two ways. Case studies and stories remain incredibly important. When you just show aggregate data of an effect something had, people look at the charts and they say, but what does that mean? And they have trouble relating to it. And so I find the most effective package always combines some more of a case study type analysis that shows what the new system of teaching and learning is like and what its mechanism is, how it's working better, with some more aggregate data that shows how that is playing out across a larger population that's in your study. And so there's a lot of work going back and forth between those to make a compelling package.
Well, I think that's exactly right. I think that's another knowledge management problem that we often don't pay enough attention to, is actually accurately capturing user stories, students, faculty, professional developers, registrars, advisors, about what is the lived experience of the change, of the improvement.
or series of improvements so that we can actually tell stories from the perspective of the participants when we get out to this sense-making activity for policymakers or for the community at large. I think that Jeremy's exactly right there, is that what's it mean?
And there's something really about valuing those stories and that act of storytelling, because those are the advocates. I mean, from every project, you're going to get people who emerge as advocates for what you're doing, but you're going to do that only if you really are listening for their advocacy in the stories they tell, and you're suggesting to them, hey, maybe you'd like to come to a meeting and share your perspective on this. And, you know, if the only thing you privilege is the more scientific-looking charts and findings, you really lose out a lot of the successful communication that's going to drive the project forward.
Right.
We're coming close to the hour, and so I want to give our folks on the phone who've been joining throughout our remarks and question time a chance to, one last chance to offer any questions for Jeremy or Chris. Again, I'll be monitoring the chat if there are any questions. And while I'm looking at that, I want to send out a brief reminder that this, again, was our last in the webinar series, but we will be posting these to includecenter.org, where there are 4 other webinars hosted by Jen Russell, Louis Gomez, Barbara Means, myself, Alicia Grunau from the Carnegie Foundation, all in an effort tackling different topics related to improvement work within networks focused on valued goals to multiple stakeholders and constituencies. And not seeing any more questions coming in, and wanting to be respectful of both our dial-in and our presenters' times, I want to say, again, another thank you to Jeremy and Chris for your remarks and for the ensuing discussion. And I hope those who are lucky enough to join us gained, and I'm sure those who will be able to find the link later on will get a chance to benefit from this discussion. So thank you both, Jeremy and Chris, for your time.
Thanks, Andy.
And then with that, I'm going to end the recording. And again, this will be posted online. And look forward to hearing from anybody. Please feel free to email myself or any one of the speakers. And you can find the contact information on includecenter.org. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.
Bye.